You are worse at reading maps than your parents. Not because you're less intelligent, not because something went wrong. It's simpler than that. There is a structure deep in your brain called the hippocampus. It was built to hold maps, real maps, the kind you build by walking somewhere yourself, watching how the afternoon light falls between buildings, learning which corner store means you're nearly there, and which street means you've gone past it. That structure required frequent use to stay sharp. Unfortunately, you have outsourced its job to a phone. A study published in Scientific Reports in 2020 tracked people's GPS habits and their spatial memory over time. The finding was precise. The more you use GPS, the steeper the decline in your brain's ability to navigate without it. The people who used GPS the most lost the most. You didn't notice. The degradation happened slowly. The phone gave you directions, and you arrived, and everything felt fine. But sit with this for a moment. 1.8 million years ago, a group of individuals left the African continent. We don't know exactly why. We know they had no map, no written language, no compass, no landmarks anyone had ever described to them, no paths anyone had ever walked, and over hundreds of thousands of years, they crossed mountain ranges, river systems, and climate zones, eventually reaching the far edge of Southeast Asia, a journey of roughly 10,000 miles, navigated entirely in their heads, across terrain nobody had ever named. We know they made it, because in 1991, a Georgian scientist named David Lordkipanidze found their bones, 5 skulls in the foothills of the Caucasus, in a place called Dmanisi, dating back 1.8 million years, the oldest confirmed human remains ever found outside Africa. One species, no map, an entire planet. They had the hippocampus, the same structure you're outsourcing, and they used it to explore the world. This is the story of the other humans, the ones who mapped a planet in their heads and left the same ability inside yours, the ability you shelve whenever you let a screen do all the thinking. Picture them before the journey. You've probably been taught to picture something bent, something shuffling, something that earns the name primitive, the way the word is usually meant, lesser, simpler, closer to an animal than to a person. That image is wrong, and it's worth replacing before you follow them across a planet. Homo erectus stood upright, fully and efficiently, in a way that earlier hominins didn't. Long legs adapted to travel long distances, a body closer in proportion to yours than to anything that came before, a heavier brow ridge, a flatter forehead, and a brain running at roughly 3/4 the capacity of a modern human's, and adapted to the world the way yours is. Forward-facing, curious, built to track something moving across open ground. If you passed one on the street, the posture would be familiar, the stride would be familiar. The disparity would come a second later, something in the brow, the jaw, their body, the one that navigated a planet, was not as different from yours as you've been told. The startling fact is this: no one told them to go. Richard Potts, who directs the Smithsonian's Human Origins Program, always comes back to that point whenever he talks about what Homo erectus did. In a 2015 paper in the Journal of Human Evolution, Potts and Tyler Faith at the University of Utah mapped climate variability in East Africa against the timing of major hominin dispersals. Their argument: not a single trigger, not a dramatic push outward, but a slow increase in adaptability, bodies and brains becoming capable of surviving a wider world. They didn't have a map. They didn't know they were out of Africa. They were just going over, into the next valley, to see what was there. Think about what that means. You know what it feels like to be somewhere unfamiliar, that anxiety when you can't immediately figure out where you are. Now multiply that not by days or years, but by generations. Every person in that chain was moving forward into terrain that had no name, carrying in their head every river crossing that had worked, every landmark that meant shelter. The map was them. It lived inside them, died with them, and was rebuilt by their children from scratch, generation after generation, for hundreds of thousands of years. Over generations, the next valley became a continent. The coastline became something none of them had words for, receding behind them as they moved into terrain no one had ever named. They left Africa approximately 1.8 million years ago. Lordkipanidze's 5 skulls at Dmanisi marked the first confirmed footprint outside the continent. But Dmanisi wasn't the destination. It was a waypoint. They kept going, east through Central Asia, into China, down through what is now Southeast Asia, across land bridges that have since submerged, into islands they had no reason to believe were there. Picture the Solo River in 1891. A Dutch physician named Eugene Dubois, knee-deep in equatorial mud, digging along the riverbank in Java, Indonesia, searching for the missing link in human evolution. And then a skull cap, flat forehead, heavy brow ridge, built for a world without shelter. You didn't make yourself. The end of a 10,000-mile journey sitting in his hands. He had found where they stopped, Homo erectus, in Java, nearly 10,000 miles from where they began. The same ability you now outsource to a phone, they used it to get there. In 1995, a neuroscientist at University College London named Eleanor Maguire was watching a television film called The Knowledge, a dramatisation of the licensing process London taxi drivers must pass before they're allowed to operate in the city. To earn a licence, a driver must memorise approximately 25,000 streets within a 6-mile radius of Charing Cross. Every route, every shortcut, every dead end. The process takes 4 years on average. Most people who attempt it fail. Maguire realised she was looking at the most intensive navigation training program in the modern world. She wanted to know what it was doing to the brain. Her study, published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences in 2000, compared the brains of 16 licensed London taxi drivers against control subjects who did not drive taxis. The posterior hippocampus was measurably larger in the taxi drivers, not slightly, significantly, and the volume correlated directly with experience. The longer a driver had been navigating London streets, the larger the relevant brain region had become. Navigation isn't a skill you practice the way you practice a language. It's a physical demand on a physical structure. The hippocampus doesn't just store maps, it builds itself around them. Use it hard enough, long enough, and you can measure the difference in grey matter. The brain you use to navigate is literally larger than the brain you don't. You have this structure, right now in your skull. You've probably returned to a city you once knew well. Routes that used to be instinctual now require the screen. You follow the arrow, you arrive, but something that used to be structural, built in like a second sense, has gone quiet. That's not nostalgia. That's the hippocampus reporting a reduction in function. Maguire's finding tells you exactly what that costs. Not in theory, in grey matter. Now think about what Homo erectus was doing for nearly 2 million years. Not navigating one city of 25,000 streets, navigating an unmapped planet, learning river systems, tracking prey across climate zones, memorizing coastlines that changed within their own lifetimes. They weren't navigating London, they were navigating the planet. The hippocampus that crossed Africa and reached the far edge of Southeast Asia was built during that journey, shaped generation by generation, the same way Maguire's taxi drivers were shaped by 4 years on London streets, except the training program lasted 2 million years, and the streets were a planet. That functionality is yours. The question is what you're doing with it. You've probably felt it without naming it. The unease you feel when your phone dies in a place you are not familiar with. The way you feel when you stand on a street you've been on before and genuinely don't know which way to turn. In 2020, researchers published a study in Scientific Reports tracking the GPS habits of 50 regular drivers against multiple measures of spatial memory. The finding was unambiguous. People with greater lifetime GPS experience had worse spatial memory when required to navigate without it. Not a general cognitive decline. Specifically, the spatial map-building Where Am I system, the hippocampal system. A follow-up study retested 13 participants 3 years later. Greater GPS use predicted a steeper decline over time. The sample was small and flagged as preliminary, but the direction was consistent. GPS use leads to spatial memory decline, not the reverse. The mechanism is simple. Self-guided navigation actively engages the hippocampus. Following turn-by-turn directions through the same route doesn't. You are moving through space while your navigation function sits idle, waiting for a task that it is no longer being given. The brain doesn't maintain capacity it isn't using. For nearly 2 million years that wasn't an option. You navigated, or you got lost. You got lost, and something found you in the dark. The hippocampus stayed sharp because the cost of losing it was immediate and terminal. The cost of losing it now is invisible. The phone always knows where you are. You always arrive. There is a version of this story where Homo erectus is a cautionary tale about a species that didn't make it. They're gone. Whatever population reached Java eventually disappeared, replaced by something that came later. The old story would say, they lost, we won. Their abilities were insufficient. Ours was better. But Homo erectus didn't lose to a better brain. They lasted nearly 2 million years. They crossed a planet before anyone else tried. They reached the far edge of Southeast Asia on nothing but their legs and the structure behind their eyes. And they stayed there for longer than our species has existed. Their abilities weren't insufficient. It was extraordinary. You have it. Somewhere in your life. There's a route you used to know that you now outsource. There was probably a moment recently when the battery died, and you stood there, annoyed or embarrassed, on a street you should have been able to navigate. You can stop being embarrassed. That feeling is a navigation system designed to hold a continent, running on low input, waiting for a reason to wake up. The same structure that carried Homo erectus from the Rift Valley to the banks of the Solo River, across 10,000 miles of unmapped terrain. It's in you. The next time you put the phone down and find the way yourself, that slight effort, the small satisfaction of arriving somewhere you navigated to, should make you proud. It isn't old school. That is a 2 million-year-old piece of hardware, doing exactly what it was built to do. It crossed the world once. It can find the way home.